appointments at the BBC, the Director General, the Governor, the presenters, are all employees of number 10 Downing Street because that's how the system works. So there's this absolute relentless barrage of bogus junk science that's been pushed at the people, and it's been going on now for ages. But what is interesting enough, that still the Times newspaper did a survey a little while ago, just a few weeks ago, that said over 50% of ordinary people don't believe a word of it. So there's still plenty of hope.
Absolutely. There is a lot of hope because this is undemocratic. It is tyrannical. And in history, if people just continue to tell the truth and continue to expose a fraud, it will implode. Here's the problem, though. Even though they've been exposed as scam artists, as frauds, the establishment just continues on down the same path. And they're so over the top in their fraud. 3 years ago, I interviewed David de Rothschild, the heir to the largest Rothschild fortune, who was then billed as savior of the planet. Here he is on the cover of Outside magazine, The Hero Gene, How to Tap Into Yours. And it actually says in here that he's like Jesus Christ. I guess the Rothschilds have always thought they were the Merovingian line. And so it says he is a savior. He is a Christ. I mean, this is a new religion. Al Gore has said they're going into religion, the plastic Jesus. And then I have Al Gore here saying he is this is Newsweek, the eco-prophet. And it says he's the thinking man saving us. When I had Rothschild on, I said, why are the ice caps on Mars melting? They've since started getting larger again because the sun's cooled off. And he said, because the Mars is closer to the sun than the Earth. And I said, no, Mars is the next planet out. And I said, why are the moons on Jupiter and Saturn melting? And he said, well, they're closer to the sun than the Earth. And I said, no, they're not. And you know, he laughed at me, not because he didn't know, but he thought my audience was like the general public, so dumb. I mean, Al Gore didn't invent the internet. Polar bears aren't drowning. Their numbers are way up. But they know carbon isn't carbon dioxide. They know all this, but they're so over the top that they just keep getting away with it. How do you counter this level of just over-the-top, in-your-faceness?
I think what we need to do, and we've started over here, we haven't got that far along the road yet, but my party, the United Kingdom Independence Party, was born out of ordinary people. The ordinary man, and we have an expression over here, the ordinary man on the Clapham omnibus. It's just, you know, the ordinary, I think you call him an ordinary Joe, or you call him Joe Sixpack. These people, you've got to have faith in them. I don't think they're nearly as stupid as the liberal middle-class elite think they are. They know they're being conned. They know they're being lied to. And they're voting for us now when we have a proportional representation system. When we get away from the two-party system, which we have for our European elections, they feel that they can vote for us, and they do vote for us in their millions. And now what we need to do is we're going to continue with this. We're putting 500 candidates up for the Westminster elections in May. That's virtually a complete ticket of UKIP people. So everybody in every constituency can say, just a minute, I have got an alternative. And I think the same thing needs to happen in America, because you do lead the world. You will always lead the world for the foreseeable future, and you can turn this round. And I think if people could look to America, the new world, if you will, by doing something like this, I think it would be fabulous. And it far be it from me to suggest what you should call that party, but I would call it the American Constitution Party, because most of what's going on, as I see it, in America, and the same thing in the United Kingdom, is actually a breach of Constitution. And if you could get back to your Constitution, I mean, just looking at this, the situation with Interpol, looking at climate, looking at even at the new healthcare bill that's coming through Congress and the Senate that you're dealing with out there at the moment, that is completely alien to the American Constitution. It says nowhere, as I can see in the American Constitution, that you are responsible for your neighbor's health bills.
But even worse than that, even if you're for socialism, which is alien to our system, which creates dependency and corruption and waste, Obama is massively cutting Medicare and Medicaid while jacking up taxes and prison time if you don't get the insurance. And if you tell your doctor you don't want a certain treatment, the government throws you off the rolls, and it does create government bureaucracies that decide what treatment you get. It does give you rationing. I'll never forget 3 or 4 years ago, right before Gordon Brown got into power, I watched Tony Blair in the House of Commons during Prime Minister's Questions on C-SPAN, and he admitted one member of the parliament got up and said, of the House of Commons got up and said, well, my constituent had to wait 18 months for a brain tumor operation. Normally, it's over 90% operable, but because she had to wait so long, she died. And Tony Blair said, yes, it's true that happens, and we're working on that. I mean, I don't think the average American realizes that under the European socialist healthcare model that a lot of hellish stuff happens. Can you fill people in here who may be in the dark about that, sir?
Yes, we did what you're doing now. We did in 1946, 1947. We got rid of a perfectly good health system, which was based on individuals and individuals' relationships with their own doctors and their own local hospitals, which were built on some part charitable status, part fee-paying status, and they brought in this terrible monolith called the National Health System. And the National Health System, we have bred a monster that you wouldn't believe. It's the biggest employer in Europe. It costs literally billions and billions and billions of pounds a year. We've just wasted £8 billion to over $10 billion on a failed IT system. Nothing in the National Health System works. It's a sacred cow over here. Would you believe that now we have more administrators in the system than we have hospital beds? This is the sort of lunacy that you get. And I've been reading through the bill. I'm not an expert on it, but I would beg you, and I'd beg all your listeners, for goodness sake, write to whoever does represent you and say, for God's sake, don't vote for this. This will be a disaster.
Well, look at the VA.
I don't quite know how it's happened, but you seem to have elected a socialist president, and I don't know how that happened.
Well, look at the VA. I mean, hellish health care for our veterans. More than half the money gets spent on administration, not on the health care. And reading this bill, it is just a giant boondoggle. It gives the insurance companies government immunity. It gives the hospitals immunity. And you talk about globalization, global governance, all these things that are happening. They have to get rid of local control to the national level if the national is going to be handed over to the international. And we've interviewed Nigel Farage, former leader of your party, and others. We've interviewed Lord Monckton and others who talk about global governance. The new head of the European Union, as you know, Herman von Rompuy, says this is the first year of global governance. They believe the Copenhagen Treaty was the first year of global governance. Can you speak to this pan-global Europe that the EU talks about, the European Union model taking over the planet through treaties? And I remind listeners, 3 years ago, George Bush signed a transatlantic treaty with the SPP, Security Prosperity Partnership, with the European Union. So this integration is far along under stealth. Can you speak to their master plan?
Yes, certainly. All I can tell so far is that we're dealing with a sort of a European Soviet system, and of course, all we need to do then is if we then have a North American or an American system which is similar, and it's going that way. Every day you get closer to that situation. It's only a matter of time before those two power blocks come together. The only thing at the moment that is stopping that going forward at an even faster rate is a fundamental hostility in the European bureaucracy and parliament, a fundamental hostility to the United States, a fundamental hostility to the concept of free trade and capitalism. There's a fundamental hostility to this. So there's actually a sort of a theoretical problem that needs to be overcome. But as soon as that is overcome, you've got to understand that these, as I'm sure your listeners do, that senior politicians They don't have anything to do with the NHS. They go into private wards. They're privately looked after. If they have a brain tumour, it's dealt with immediately.